I am here with Antrese Rowe, and I'm so thrilled to introduce this incredible mom, coach, woman to all of you. So let me introduce her, and then we're going to get into her topic, which is a good one. It is your identity is purposed for your family, and I'm very excited to learn specifically about this topic, and I'm sure all of our moms are as well. So let's introduce Antrese to all of you. She is a certified life coach. She has several years of experience in helping more women transform their mindsets from fear to courageously taking all that they are called to accomplish in their life. In addition to being a life coach, she is also a writer, a podcast host, a transformational speaker, and author of the book, You Are Equipped: How You Can Do Hard Things with Grace, Love, and Grit. Her and her husband, Marcus, have 4 kids, and they live in Jacksonville, Florida, where I'm also from. So go Jacksonville. And they love serving in their community and at their local church. So Antrese, thank you for saying yes to be a part of this, to want to pour in and serve the moms. And we're so thrilled to learn from you today, really how your identity can be purposed for your family. So tell us a little bit about your topic and just about your testimony of what you feel like God led and put in your heart to want to speak about this.
So first, I'm so honored to be here. So thanks for having me. And I'm just thrilled to and excited. I'm like, this is what gets me going every day. Opportunities to be able to share with women, and just pour into women and just give them this that life-giving, just the stuff that God gives me, really. So it's the overflow of what He's given me. And really, before I even became a mom, I always just talked to God about one day being a wife and a mother. I know that might sound a little strange, but I'm like, it was always a desire of my heart to have a family. So I knew that one day that, I would want to be a wife and I'd want to be a mother. And so I would talk to God about those things before I even had the opportunity. And one of the things that He showed me was that it was important for me to know who I was before I could really even have a family, because being healthy in my mind was going to be crucial to being able to be a good wife and a good partner, and also being a good mother to children. So even through dating, I was just sharing with a young lady the other day, even in my dating experience, one of the things that I gleaned from dating was getting to know more about me. And as I got to know more about me and what I liked and what I disliked, it helped me develop more of who I am, and just really walk confidently in who I am to be. So that's a little bit about how I started on that journey of understanding my identity and how it's purpose for family. And then through coaching and talking to other women and raising my own kids, like when my kids were small, one of the big lessons that I always got from God was that mothering is, again, it's more about refining who you are than about the children so much. Like you definitely are teaching them along the way, but every relationship that God puts us in, there's something for us to glean and to learn from the person we're in relationship with.
That is so good that you just talked about finding your identity of who you are even before you step into that role of being a wife or being a mom. So what would you say for the moms that maybe they have that kind of question of I don't really know who I am, or I had babies when I was young. Maybe they got married, they had a baby when they were 18 or 19 or 20, and they kind of feel like I didn't find my identity, or I don't know who I am, in that kind of young season. What would you say as encouragement or some next steps for those moms that are like, I didn't have that season where I walked with God before I had a family, but now I want to walk with Him and find my identity?
So one of the things, it's funny because one of the things my mom told me when I went away to college, I've known Jesus since I was a kid, but one of the things that she told me, because that is a season where you can kind of get away when you leave home or you go away from home. And she told me, she said, if you don't do anything else, try and read a Proverbs a day. She was like, they're not too long and you can follow along. So if you get off track, you can just jump right back in. There's 31 chapters, so she's like, it coordinates with almost every month of the year. So she was like, if you don't do anything else, do that. So I would say, I think it's just being intentional about wanting to spend time with God, not beating yourself up, not having any shame. And in the season of mothering, we often find ourselves not having a whole lot of time. So just being consistent with the time that you have and knowing that God honors all of that, that's when my kids were really small and I had 4 under 5. It was
Wow.
more, it was more about just being intentional. So there were times where I would have like, I wouldn't have a whole lot of time. Or like I would talk to God while I was nursing a baby, So he's not looking for like this, like, oh, you have to be sitting in the same spot, at the same time every day. If you have that kind of time, that's great. But if you don't, it's just the intentionality of wanting to meet and create that space to have God in your heart.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like one of the things that I learned in my early like marriage journey before I had babies, and maybe you can relate to this as well. How many years were you married to your husband before you had babies?
We actually had a honeymoon baby. We were like, we're not
Oh
preventing, we're not trying. And then we were like, surprise.
So you like married, honeymoon baby, and then you had 4 babies under 5. So you just didn't
Yes.
stop having kids.
No.
You're like, we're doing this.
Yes.
So well, and you probably can speak to this even for being like a life coach, but I know for me, like I was married to my husband for 5 years before we had our first daughter, and we really got to enjoy that time, like being married before we had babies, and everyone's journey like different. But I'll never forget, like really walking through finding my identity, even who I was as a married person, and then again becoming a mom and feeling like my identity is wrapped up in my kids or my spouse or whatever. And I feel like anytime I'm like struggling with like overwhelm or anxiety or my loss of purpose or my identity, it's because I'm putting my identity in other things. I'm putting my identity in my husband. I'm putting my identity in my kids. And when my husband makes a mistake or my kids are crazy or someone fails me, I feel then like a failure or I've lost myself because I don't have a strong foundation for my identity. So my question for you is like for the moms that are struggling to find their identity, what are some tips and some strategy that you have for them so that they can receive clarity and be able to just walk in confidence with who Christ has called them to be?
So first and foremost, I will say again, I'm like, it's just again, it's so important to have that time where you're quiet before the Lord, because that's really when he pours into your heart who you are. And what I have found is even in those quiet times, like one of the things God has shared with me is the only person you can control is you. Can't control your husband, you can't control the kids. And that's kind of the open perspective I even had in mothering. I'm like, my kids, they have free will, you know? And so I don't get so wrapped up in, things having to be like a certain way, because that's when you get disappointed too, when things don't happen exactly how in your mind you envision them playing out. So
Right.
when you remember that you're an individual, and again, whoever you're in a relationship with, they have free will too. So it's one of those things where if you're struggling with identity, it's because you need to sit before God and you need to allow him to pour into you and show you who you are, how he's wired you. What are the things I tell clients? Like one of the first conversations that we have is about asking God how he sees you. And I have them do this exercise because I'm like, he's going to tell you things that you're going to marvel at, really. I think a lot of times we have this idea because of relationships we've had with people that God is going to say things and we're afraid really to ask him those questions. But no, he wants to sit with you. And I've really gotten this from learning God's character and nature and reading my Bible. And when you read your Bible, you see the relationships that he's had with different people, with Noah, with Moses, with Joseph. And from even looking at those relationships that God had with individuals, that's one of the things that taught me that God was a friend, like how he communicated with them, how it was just back and forth. It wasn't, especially Moses's story. Like that's one of my favorite because the way he and God communicated, such a friendship. So it's really just spending that time in the word, getting to know God's character and his nature, because I feel like that takes that barrier out of the way, where sometimes because of religion or other people who have given us misconceptions really of who God is, it gives us an opportunity to know God for ourselves and hear how he feels about us.
Yeah.
And then once we start to get that and we lean into who he's created us to be,
Yeah.
then we can start to begin to look out into the world in terms of helping others in our lives.
That's so good. And so where would you recommend in the word would be a good starting place for a mom who wants to really understand who God is, who Jesus is, and be able to find their identity on that foundation of Christ?
So, so like I said, the Proverbs has never failed me, you know. And I even do Proverbs with my kids. Like in the summer months, my kids are in school during the school year, but in the summer months over lunch, we will go over Proverbs and we'll have conversations about the Proverbs. So that's a good place to start. Psalms is another good place to see just, you know, like David pour out his heart to God, you know. And then I often like to also look at Jesus's ministry when he was here on earth
Right.
and even how he communicated with his disciples. And again, a friend he was to them. So John is also a good place to read about Jesus and, you know, kind of watch how he was. And then, like I said, my ultimate favorite is Exodus because I just love Moses' story.
To the Old Testament, right in the beginning. Get straight. It's so good. So my final question for you, and I feel like there's lot of moms that may be listening right now, I know myself included, that may have felt guilt or shame centered around their identity. Like maybe it's a working mom who's not able to be home during the days and raise her babies, and she's struggling to find her identity and purpose for her family because she feels like a lot of her time is at a job that maybe she doesn't enjoy, or maybe she does enjoy it and that is a huge part of her passion purpose.